Hi, my name is CJ and this is my RC channel. So as you can see, I have mounted a plate to mount the speed controller and the receiver, and it's not made out of fiberglass. I found a sheet of like a rubber plastic material that I had, and basically it was one of several dividers for a large container that can be sectioned, and I had a couple of extra dividers, so I trimmed one up to the size I needed. It's a nice smooth plastic. It's going to work great. It's soft enough to have the countersinks just kind of push right in. And if you're curious as to how I got the holes correctly, I took a piece of paper and identified the hole back here, punched it through, laid it over the two holes at the front, felt for where they were, and then pushed those through with the tip of a felt pen, and then used this to mark them on here, and done. So now I can decide on my mounting positions for this, and I've got a nice smooth surface. It's going to be a tremendous bonding surface for rubber tape, two-sided tape, and then I'll find the receiver location. So I'm going to do a few little knickknacks. I'm going to swap some springs around and such. There's no need for you to be totally bored watching me do that. And then I'll get to the electronics. I just thought I'd talk for a moment about tuning. So as you know, I'm running the longer front shocks, but I've shortened them dramatically, so I can run either long springs or short front springs. And there's different ways to kind of stack things up and get well, I've got what I think is a good initial pack and ride height, where the chassis is pretty much level. There's a decent amount of droop at both ends. I think this is a good starting point as far as spring rates and preload and ride height go. There are certain things you need to be able to do stuff like this. For example, to be able to run these shorter front springs on these longer shocks, I used a pair of deep shock cups, spring cups. And I'll just give you an example. This is a standard height cup, this is a medium height cup, and this is a tall cup. So I'm running a pair of tall cups up front. That raises the springs and reduces the amount of preload I need to add, so that I'm not beyond the point where there's threads on these long shock towers. Now the next thing is springs. It's definitely an investment. It's probably something that you do over time. I certainly did. You kind of just start collecting them. You can buy them in sets. The main thing is keeping them organized so you know what they are. You don't forget where they go, which style, you know, who makes them, what poundage they are, coil number, etc. For example, one of the things I do is I use these fishing tackle boxes. They're cheap. They're like $3 or $4 a piece if you buy them in packs of 6. And I'll take the shock pack, as you can see, and I trim the top of it. So I've got the part number, I've got the color, whether it's a front or a rear spring, anything about it, like whether it's a low frequency or a high frequency spring. And then I write on it the coils and poundage. So this is a 4.7 pound spring, 6.5 coils, 4.3, 7.25 coils, 3.85, and then I put them in a descending order, so I know that I'm going from, you know, a lighter spring to stiffer springs, or vice versa. So if I just pulled this off and I say, okay, I need a stiffer spring, well, I need to go to another box because this is the stiffest spring I've got in this box. But if I need to go lighter, then I'm working this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. And it makes tuning much easier. Plus, there's different brands of springs. For example, these are all associated springs except for this top row here. These are associated springs here. Those are all fronts. So all the fronts are boxed together. And we've got rear springs. As you can see, some of these are in use on other kits already. The greens are over there. The reds are elsewhere at the moment, and so on. So this is a good way to organize your springs, and you know where they are. You know what grade they are in relationship to each other. You know the manufacturer, because sometimes the poundage is different between manufacturers. So for example, 4.5. Let's see, that's a 4.2. So I might have a spring by another manufacturer that's a 4.3 or a 4.4 versus the 4.2 or 4.5 here. So if I want to try to find something in between here, I would check the other boxes and other manufacturers. Plus, it's kind of like food cooking. One person, what's a pinch of salt? Sometimes even what you would think, like spring rate weights, have variance. That's why when I use shock oil, I write down the manufacturer of the shock oil that I'm using, because Locy's 27.5 may not be the same as Team Associated's 27.5. And if you look around the internet, you might even find, I've seen different comparison charts between one versus the other, where they kind of really lay out people who've gone through the time to do that analysis. That's more work than I'm willing to do, or am capable of doing, for that matter. That would require some serious equipment and whatnot. In any event, this is a very easy way to organize your stuff. Likewise, with assorted other parts, these little divider boxes come in really handy. And there's other options as well. For example, this little box here, it's F1. These are all F1 springs. There's mainly one spring on the back of your F1 car for the main shock, and these are all the different springs I have for that to dial that in. And then I usually have one divider box for each car. For example, this is all parts for the GT, the 1/8 scale. These are all the little suspension parts, and I've got little things taped down on the bottom that tell me what those are. Like, these are the rear adjusters. These are the rear front adjusters for the swing arm kingpins that give you caster and toe. These are the front inserts. These are the inserts for the differentials, to move the differentials up and down. These are inserts for the outers, and then gaskets, shock pistons, spare O-rings, different bladders, assorted shims to make adjustments and things, swing arm parts, and a few springs. Things like that. I've got the same thing for my my TLR, and that's where those red springs are. Incidentally, those are on the drag car. There's a specific box for that, and it's got everything from sway bars to assorted suspension pieces. But that's, when I'm working on that particular car, I've got that box of stuff. I know where to go for all the little knickknacks that are gonna, let me make adjustments to suspension, ride height, whatever. As long as we're talking about keeping organized, another thing that you want to keep organized is all of your different tuning fluids. For example, these are all shock fluids, and I've got another box just like this that is full of diff fluid containers, and another one that is full of tire prep fluids. Now, again, these are things you're probably going to acquire over time, unless you've got some serious cash to dump into these things. For example, shock fluids generally run anywhere from $7 to $15 for a container of fluid. So if you're buying a half dozen different fluids at a minimum to have some variance and adjustability for front and for rear across multiple kits. You're going to spend some money right there. Likewise with the diff fluids. If you're, when you've got diff fluids as low as 7,000 and as high as 1.5 to 2 million. Now, when you're getting to the million numbers, you're generally working with, the big volume, like, 1.5 million, 2 million, 1 million. You're not doing a very narrow gradient. You're just going in big blocks at that point. But when you're in the lower numbers, you probably want 7, 8, 9, 10, up through 15 at 1 to 2,000 intervals. Okay, this is a set of upgraded or replacement anti-sway bars for the Slash. Now, it's a complete kit, so if you don't have any sway bars at all on your Slash because of its model or whatever, you can buy this kit, number 6898, and have everything you need to set them up. Now, they were going to give you 3 different thicknesses or weights, and then from there you can adjust them. I think there's 3 per. Anyway, this is a sway bar, okay? An anti-sway bar. Basically what it's doing, it's anchored here against the chassis, and then these 2 arms are on your suspension arms. And when one goes up, the other one wants to rise with it. And the flex between the 2 is that anti-sway action, keeping the chassis from rolling to one side or the other. Okay? Now, let's say that you've got these on your car, right? Like this. And you want to stiffen that up. The first move shouldn't be just replacing to a bigger bar, because these are adjustable by leverage. In other words, this clasp here can be loosened and it can be put all the way to the front of the bar, or you could slide it back several millimeters, maybe as much as 1/4 of an inch before it's, you're going to have a geometry issue. But there is some adjustability as far as moving this clasp forward and backward, probably over a range of about 5 to 8 centimeters. And that is going to give you more or less effect for this particular diameter and weight of spring, because this is basically a spring and its action is this. And so if you move these clasps further in, you're stiffening this spring effectively. If you move them further out, you're giving more leverage to, because remember the pivot point's back here. So the further out you move this clasp, the more leverage this arm has, and the less effective or lighter this spring is going to be. So you have a tremendous amount of adjustability with this type of sway bar setup. It's very nice that they provided them like this. So a lot of cars do have that ability where you can make small adjustments, but these have a fairly broad range because of the way they're cut and designed. So try to make use of that. If you've got one pair of these, like this car came with a set of sway bars, and you're not racing on road, you're not going to want heavy sway bars, you're just trying to tune it for dirt or something like that, try making changes here. Slide them in a little bit, slide them out a little bit. Try that with the handling of the car. Let's say the car is it's pushing into turns, or it's spinning on you. Okay, the rear end keeps coming around on you. Loosen the rear sway bar and tighten the front sway bar, and see if that doesn't change things a bit. It's one of the many things you can tinker with. Okay, before I do things like try to balance out the car and figure out where I want this. I kind of need to put everything else on with the exception of the body. So this is a front bumper kit. It's called the Scalpel Bumper. It's a J Concepts product. As you can see here, it retails for $40. It usually sells for under that, like $32, $35, somewhere in that range. Anyway, it's part number 2173, and it gets rid of the stock front bumper, the off-road style bumper with the big kick up, and it gives you a foam road style bumper that is going to work with a normal style car and or street truck body. And that's the idea, is to give you that aerodynamic advantage, to lower the vehicle and give you an appropriate bumper for that environment. So I'm going to go ahead, open this up, and put it on. So we have one large foam bumper, and looks like we have 2 carbon plates, and we have some spacers, looks like some body posts, which will probably be optional. Okay, they give you a, that's interesting. This is a set of spacers, a recommendation for spacer locations to lower the suspension. Interestingly enough, it's based on the kit that I used earlier, but it wasn't included with that kit. Yeah, it's cool. Okay, so that just shows you where they recommend putting the spacers if you are trying to emulate the scalpel conversion for this particular body. Which I do not have. I'm using a different body, but this does make a pretty much straight up conversion. And these are all the parts, and they give us a nice detailed set of instructions, which is nice. A lot of stuff comes these days without any printed instructions. Okay, our front bumper is already off, so we're going to switch out that blue plate for the black one. Okay, now the body posts go in place of the stock Slash posts. I may be using a different body mount kit, so I'm going to set these aside for the time being, because I have a Proline kit for this. And they've given us a slightly larger bolt there. I wonder if I've got a stainless steel equivalent to this. It looks like I do. Oh, this is longer. I don't need that. Let's use this one. Yeah, that's going to be fine. So we're going to push these barrels through here. Simple enough. These 2 or 2.5s. They are 2.5s. Yep. Let's see what size I need up front here. Empty. So the two stock bolts go up front. It was a little tough getting that plate aligned with the front holes. I had to loosen the bolts on the pads, but not a big deal. It's not bad. It's not totally flat. It's got a little bit of a kick up to it, but all in all, it's a nice kit. There's no issues with tires touching. So all things considered, I like it. I think it's a great kit. And for the money, you can't really beat it. No one else has a solution like this for the Slash. It's not something that bolts on quite so simply. Okay, I'm going to do a little cleanup and get ready to do the electronics and balance things out. I think we're getting to that point. Got the sway bars on front and rear, got the front and rear bumpers on. Worry about hanging the body later. That's not going to really come into play as far as the balancing issue goes. So we're going to figure out mounting locations, do some soldering, and we'll be just about finished. I got this backwards. Not that that matters, but it's easier to read it when you know that front is front and rear is rear instead of vice versa. Okay, 52% of the weight's on the rear. We got a little bit of a discrepancy left to right, so our battery side is heavier. No real surprise there. Let's see. If we move that outboard, well, actually it's got to face this way. But if we move that more outboard, how does that affect things? It's still the same. Okay, but we are a little heavier on the diagonal here, so let's try actually seems to have made it worse. Let's try moving the battery rearward. Can't go all the way. Let's try it with a slightly smaller capacity battery. Maybe lighten it up that way a little. Actually, that is the smaller capacity battery. This is an 8000. I wonder how this would do with a shorty pack. Not sure. No. Let's do this. I want the bigger batteries because this isn't, I mean, it's a 1/10 scale, but it's a 1/10 scale all-wheel drive truck. So that motor and speed controller are going to gobble a lot more juice. Let's see. I feel like they're about the same. Now, let's do something else. This thing automatically shuts off after a certain amount of time. You don't want to turn it on with weights on it. Okay. I was about to say, how did we get to 50-50? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Let's see, these are 15 grams each. That's almost balanced out the front and the rear. Okay, a little weight and I can balance out for the battery pretty good. Got 50-50. Got a little bit of a difference back here, but it's not a lot. It's pretty negligible, and that can be dialed out with a little more preload. I'm running a little more preload on one side of the vehicle because I don't want to completely set this up, you know, with weight, because then I'll just be adding a ton of weight to this thing. I don't want to add that much. Let me try something. I was wondering if this sway bar was a little tight. Okay, what I did was I loosened the two screws that are retainers for the sway bar. I was worried that I might have had them a little tight on the sway bar and the sway bar wasn't getting clean rotation, that it was influencing, shall we say. That made it even worse. It's really kind of a balancing act, and you kind of got to play with it. I spent about an hour doing this kind of thing on my Serpent GT the other day, and I finally got it dialed really nice, but it took a bit of work. It's like I was close there a few minutes ago, and I seem to have gotten it way out. I wonder what the weight on that motor is. Okay, here are the numbers. Motor weighs 218 grams, ESC weighs 90.5, that gives us 308.5 grams. The two batteries I have, the 6500 weighs 304, which is 4 grams less than the combined weight of the ESC and the speed and the motor. And the 8000 battery is 318 grams, which is 10 grams more than the combined weight. of the opposite side. So how come I'm having such a heavy one-sided numbers here? Okay, I think I see what's going on here. If you look at this wheel, it's got a tremendous amount of negative camber. This wheel's pretty straight up and down. Fronts look like they're doing okay. Basically, the suspension is not tuned and adjusted. And I'm going to be swapping out these drive shafts shortly anyway. My main point of putting it on the scales was to kind of get a feeling for placement of the equipment. I don't think that's an issue. I've weighed it. You've seen the numbers. The battery pack is actually, the 6500 pack is actually slightly lighter than the equipment over here, not including the servo, and the 8000 pack is slightly heavier, all within a very small amount of correction. Not worth doing a bunch of ballast, not worth moving a ton of things around. If I keep the battery more in the rearward, it's definitely going to be more in the general position of these pieces of equipment. I think I'm just going to go with the standard setup, receiver, ESC, motor, leave that all like that. If I do want to try some small amounts of ballast later, I'll worry about that then. I'm actually going to switch these out. I'm going to go back to the short one since I'm probably only going to be running 2S. I've thought about running 3S or larger packs. Sorry, camera battery died. I don't think I'm going to need to really worry about the battery packs. As I was saying, I was thinking about maybe running some 3S packs at some point. They're not going to be legal for racing, and as I mentioned, I'm not going to be bashing. I'm not going to be doing speed runs, so I'm not even going to worry about that contingency. I'm going to go ahead and put these two parts back on. I am glad that I got the kit because it provides this slightly taller arm, and for the 8000 pack that will probably facilitate fit a little better. Also, it'll help me move this more rearward if I want to. So I'm going to go ahead, pause the video. I'm going to switch these guys back. I'm going to take out this battery, and then I'm going to start up, get out my soldering equipment and start working on this. And I'll cover as much of that as I can for you and cut you in on that. So that's where we're going. And once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take these wheels off. The wheels kind of hid, if you can believe that, what was kind of going on there. I didn't really notice until I looked off to the side, because one of the things I was thinking as I was doing the weighing was, I wonder if the tires are having some kind of influence on this process, because they are a rockered tire. They, as you can see, they're a slick, and it's a dry clay kind of slick for very high traction tracks and or hard pack tracks and or street. And by canting one of these over, that's going to really change the footprint profile and probably the amount of weight that's being put on that rear corner, which explains why I was getting kind of backwards results on the scales when I was trying to adjust preload. So what I'll probably do is, once I've got the suspension equalized and I've got everything adjusted, I'll put it on the tuning board with a correct set of test wheels. I'll probably just take a set of wheels that don't have tires on them, or I'll take something that's like a hard street tire with the 12mm hex and go ahead and do the weight tuning that way. Because with these soft canted tires, depending on how I place it, I'm going to get an odd thing. I checked the scales, I zeroed out everything, I tested all the scales. I took an item that I had that was 90 grams, I test weighed it on my little digital kitchen scale, and then I tested on each of the scales individually. They all checked out right to the 100th of a gram, so the problem is definitely in here. But like I said, since we've weighed this equipment and weighed the battery, we know that we're equal here within a 5 or 10 gram difference. So we shouldn't be getting those radical swings. And if you recall, remember when I flipped the car, the heavy side became the light side became the heavy side. That shouldn't happen. Those two numbers should have switched when I spun the thing around. So there's something going on here with tires and suspension that is causing that inequality. So that will get worked on later. And this is one of the many things to kind of deal with. I wasn't really thinking about that because I was more trying to, you know, get a beat on this versus this. And what I should have done was what I ended up doing, which was get out a piece of paper, go online, write down the numbers. If you can't find the numbers, weigh the item, compare everything, do the math, and see what's what. And there really was no left to right weight difference, more than plus or minus 5 to 10 grams either way, depending on which battery I was using. It was under or over by 5 to 10 grams. So that's not enough to have a 2% left to right difference. This thing is way too heavy for that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead, do what I said, and come back at this. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.